Good morning, everyone, and happy Sunday to you. What a fantastic weekend it was for the Cleveland Browns. Not that anybody cares except for me, but I'm excited. It was a great weekend. Anyway, got a lot to get through today. We've got we want to take a look at what's going on with the markets in general, and then we want to take a look at what's coming up for next week. We have the Fed coming up next week. I don't know what we've got going on with North Korea. I know they did some stuff this weekend, and it's getting a little heated up, and we'll see how that impacts the market overall. But a lot of economic data, FOMC coming up, and more earnings. So another boatload of earnings next week. So, Friday, and I'll be honest, Friday I was not in any shape to be trading at all whatsoever. So I didn't do a whole lot on Friday. But it looks like, look, we've had a really nice run in a really short period of time. We've created some gaps on the daily time frame. Had a little bit of a pullback. We are overbought. It wouldn't be shocking to me if we were to have some type of a pullback next week, maybe off of FOMC, maybe off North Korea, maybe just off things being a bit overbought. But still in a very healthy uptrend for a lot of the markets, and there's still a lot of skepticism out there. Markets tend to climb the wall of worry. Are we overvalued? Probably. Does that mean we can't go higher? I don't know. I mean, who knows? I know that every time the bears have tried to get aggressive, it has not worked in their favor for, we're going on 8 years now, 9 years. So really impressive market, but we've had a big run. We've got some big earnings coming out next week, and we'll see how that all impacts the markets. But you have to admit, pretty impressive. So bulls are still in control. For how much longer that happens, I don't know. Maybe we just consolidate. We don't necessarily have to have a dramatic pullback. We could just consolidate and work the overbought conditions off through time. We'll see how this all plays out. So NASDAQ, very impressive move. Pull back a little bit on Friday. We'll see if we continue to drift lower and fill some of these gaps, or if we just consolidate a bit and create a little island out in the middle of nowhere and then move higher. We'll see. Financials had a bit of a pullback on Friday. Now, they also had a gap on the daily, and wouldn't be surprised if we were to pull back and maybe fill that gap. I mean, actually, we were pretty close to filling that gap now. But we could continue to drift back on down and test this trend line here. Now, I was looking at this as a potential double bottom in the financials. Maybe we pull back down and we test this trend line, which would be a higher low, and we bounce off of there. We'll see what happens. We were trying to reclaim the 50-day simple moving average, and we're not able to hold on to it, but we'll see what happens next week. Gold and GDX, GDXJ. So gold found a little bit of support right at the 200-day moving average. If the markets weaken a bit, maybe we get some movement in gold. GDX, GDXJ, actually kind of look like maybe they might be putting in a little bit of a bear flag here, but they are oversold, and we're starting to see stochastics curl up a little bit. If gold gets a bounce, especially if more of this tension from North Korea happens, more saber rattling, and maybe something that develops with the FOMC, the Fed meeting next week, we'll see how that all plays out. Not only that, but just a lot of economic data, and that could impact gold and the miners. So worth keeping an eye on. JNUG, Nugget, GDXJ, and GDX. I think it's worth at least having those on our radar, especially if we see some weakness in the market. If we see some weakness in the dollar, if we see strength in the dollar, then I think you're going to see some weakness in gold. But we'll see what happens with the Fed next week. That could be very telling. All right, let's take a look at the IBB, which actually is very impressive right now. Had a really nice move, and we are consolidating again just below the $300 mark. Now we're above we've reclaimed the 50-day moving average. We're overbought. We're getting some biotech news out next week, so we'll see how that plays with the sector. We had some good biotech news out last week with a couple of names, AKBA, which is on my list here, but worth keeping an eye on this space. Very impressive the way this has held up, and if we could take out 300 with 305 with real conviction, I think that would be pretty impressive for the IBB. I'd like to see us consolidate out here a little bit and get back into the Bollinger Band, build a base. It wouldn't even be terrible if we were to drift down and close this gap a little bit and then move higher. But IBB, pretty impressive, and one of my favorite spaces out there right now. IWM, pretty dramatic pull on Friday. I shouldn't say it's dramatic. I mean, it was we closed right at the low of the day. Pretty decent pullback on decent volume. Again, we had a few gaps on the daily that needed to be filled, and maybe we pull back now and close this gap to 138 or so, 137. Maybe we even come back and test the 50-day moving average again. But we've got a lot of moving average support in this area, and I think some of the actions that have been taken by the Trump administration, and it could be really, really good for small caps. So look, we had a really nice run. We gapped up a couple of days. We got out of the upper Bollinger Band. Pulling back is a healthy thing. Let's see how we act somewhere around that 50-day moving average. See if that can act as support for us to bounce from and close out these gaps. I think that would actually be a very healthy thing. IYT closed near the low of the day on Friday and was unable to stay above the 50-day moving average. So now we look to see if we can pull back to this 100-day, 100 EMA and act as support. We got some price support right around 163. Right? Let's see if that holds as support. If it doesn't, then we're likely going to come down and maybe test that 160 area again as support, and we'll see if that acts as a place where we can bounce. But IYT, a little bit of a pullback on Friday, but look, not a big shocker heading into a weekend before the FOMC, and some stuff going on out there with North Korea, right? So not a big shocker that we pulled back. So let's see what else we've got going on. Let's take a look at the SMH, which also had a pullback after, making a new high, and pretty good pullback on significant volume. Now, we do have a couple of semiconductor names that we'll be reporting next week that could set the tone for the semis. Maybe we pull back, we close this gap, we touch the 50-day simple moving average. But look, SMH has been a leading sector for a long time. It still looks very, very healthy. If we pull back and test that 50-day and it holds a support, I think that would be a positive thing. Let's see what happens next week. But did see some weakness there on Friday. And we'll see what the earnings do this week. S&P 500 pulled back. We pierced the upper Bollinger Band. We're consolidating. Not a terrible thing, but also have gap to potentially fill on the S&P 500. Overbought. So, like I said, heading into next week, don't feel as though if we have a pullback, that would necessarily be a bad thing. I actually think that could be pretty healthy. Let's see what else we've got going on. Volatility, we didn't have any this week with TVIX and UVXY, but if we do get some kind of a significant pullback, they are extremely oversold, and we could see a pretty good snapback there. So worth keeping an eye on volatility next week. I mean, there is a gap to fill on the reverse as well for these. So worth keeping an eye on volatility if we continue to see some weakness. The dollar below the 200-day moving average. If the dollar continues to drift lower than and loses this 200-day, I mean, it's lost it for right now, but if we lose this in a dramatic way, then you're, like I said, if the dollar weakens, then gold and the miners could be something to keep an eye on. Maybe even utilities, which have actually held up really, really well, and we'll go through that in a second. But worth keeping an eye on the dollar always, just to see, for commodities, right? USO kind of looking like we're building out a bear flag here. Energy sector has been pretty weak, even with OPEC coming out and defending, potentially extending price cuts. I think a lot of people were just positioned wrong. A lot of big money guys have been positioned wrong in oil. Things were looking pretty impressive there for a while. Like we were getting ready to take off to the races once again, and it actually looking like we're kind of bear flagging out. But this is a sector that I think is worth keeping an eye on, more for long-term hold type positions, right? If you got some oil and energy names out there that you like, if oil itself continues to decline, then maybe you look at some of these energy names as potential starter positions for a long-term hold. You want to look for the companies that have the best balance sheets and decent properties, stuff like that. That's what you want to keep an eye on. But I think oil is, look, if we break below $10 or $9.90 or so with conviction, that could be problematic for that whole space. But we'll see what happens next week. I have started to dip my toe in a couple oil names as oil has been declining, and those are long-term holds. Let's see here. What else we got going on? All right, let's take a look at some individual sectors. Aerospace defense pulling back a bit, and gap to fill here as well. I don't think that necessarily would be a bad thing. I think that would be a healthy thing. Let's pull back, maybe close that gap and test the 50-day moving average, work off that overbought condition. And look, with everything that's going on in the world, you would think aerospace defense could be a pretty good place to park some dough. And I'd probably look at those as more long-term hold or swing type positions. Let's see what else we've got. Home builders have had a nice recent run. Maybe heading into the Fed, we see some more weakness. People concerned maybe about another rate increase. Let's see what happens and see what's said. But I think pullback here also would be healthy. Let's see how it acts somewhere around the $37 mark. We've got some good, decent potential price support in that area. Trend line support. Maybe we come all the way back to the 50-day moving average. But overbought, working off that overbought condition. But nice little trend from the lower left to the upper right. And coming into spring selling season, so I don't think this is. I do like this sector quite a bit. So on a pullback, there could for that sector, I think you could potentially get some, again, probably swing or medium-term swing or even maybe long-term hold opportunities in that space. All right, let's see what else we have. We have materials. So, U.S. Steel got whacked last week, and it is actually kind of interesting, I think, to keep an eye on. It really seemed like it got maybe a bit overdone. We'll go over that in a minute. I've got it on my list of stocks to watch this week, but worth keeping an eye on. X, I think, maybe even AK Steel. We'll see what happens. That earnings report from U.S. Steel was terrible, actually a terrible earnings report. But see if maybe it's found some support for a bounce. So material sector pulling back a little bit here. A couple of gaps to fill on the daily, right? We could fill those gaps, come all the way down, fill those gaps, and test the 50-day moving average as support. I think that would be an area where it gets pretty interesting to really pay close attention to. That sector, XLE, we just talked about that energy space, going to be tied to oil, right? At an area of potential price support. We pierced it and then we managed to reclaim it. Let's see if we can hold on to it next week. If not, likely going to come down, maybe test the $66 area in the XLE. XLF, we already talked about financials. Let's look at industrials. Same thing with, we've got a gap to fill, come down to the 50-day moving average. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We were overbought. Let's see how we act in this area of potential price support right around 65.50. But industrials, Caterpillar had an amazing earnings report. Let's see, we already talked about tech. So, utilities, this is what I'm talking about. Utilities have really been basing out just above the 50-day, rising 50-day moving average, above the 200-day. Take out 52, let's call it 52.25 with some conviction. Maybe we get a nice run in utilities. So worth having on the radar. XLV, healthcare, really held up well when the market was kind of indecision mode. Held on to the 50-day moving average. Had a nice run last week and up into some price resistance. So wouldn't be shocked if we were to stall out here, maybe pull back. We'll see what happens. We've got a couple of names reporting in the healthcare space next week. Maybe that breaks us out. Maybe it makes us pull back. We'll see what happens next week. XLY, consumer discretionary, amazing run, completely out of the upper Bollinger Band, pulling back. A couple of gaps to fill. I think this is right around the 50-day, right? Let's see how we act back here in the 87.50 area where we've got some potential. Let's call it 88. Let's call it 88. Let's see if we pull back to 88, how that holds as support. And at the 50-day moving average, but consumer discretionary has had a really impressive run as well. Metals and mining, it's still making lower highs, right? And I don't know, was that a lower low? Yeah, it was. It was a lower low for a brief moment. No, it wasn't. Looks like it could be a double bottom. Right? Could be a little double bottom there. Trying to hold on to the 200-day moving average. Lower high. Let's see what happens here. We break below $29 with some conviction. There is a gap to fill on the daily back here. That could get problematic for metals and mining. XOP, oil and exploration, trying to hold on to this 34. Let's call it 34.50, right? Trying to hold on to that. If that breaks, we may be looking at a pullback down into the 32.50 area, somewhere around there. XRT retail. Look, anybody that follows me knows not one of my favorite sectors out there, but it had a pretty impressive run, I have to admit, and it is a hated space. So maybe this was a double bottom. I don't know. We're going to come back, looks like, and maybe test that 50-day moving average. That will be interesting to see if it can hold as support. If not, I think that is problematic for the sector. So, like I said, one of my least favorite spaces out there. All right, let's take a look at the economic calendar coming up, and we've got a lot going on, right? We've got motor vehicle sales, we've got personal income and outlays, PMI manufacturing, ISM, construction spending, and then on Tuesday the FOMC meeting begins, right? And we get on Wednesday mortgage applications, ADP employment report, Gallup, Job creation index. We've got PMI services, ISM non-manufacturing, and then we get the petroleum status report. That's Wednesday, all by 10:30 Eastern. And then at 2 o'clock, we get the FOMC meeting announcement, right? Whether they're going to raise the rate or not. Then we've got change store sales, jobs report, international trade, jobless claims, productivity and costs. We've got a lot going on. Factory orders and employment situation, right? Which is always big. And then we've got Stanley Fischer, John Williams, and Janet Yellen speaking on Friday. So we got James Bullard, Charles Evans, and Eric Rosenberg speaking from the Fed. John Williams speaks. Everybody speaks. And then consumer credit. So we got a lot going on that could impact the markets next week. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, but there is no shortage of potential market moving events next week. And then throw on top of that the earnings for next week, and there are a lot of them. Pretty good breadth. Tenet Healthcare is reporting, Gilead, Twilio, Pfizer, Apple, ConocoPhillips, British Petroleum, AMD, what's this one? Oh, Excelsis, which actually, I don't know if I put that one on my list or not, but I think I meant to. Okay. Sprint, Groupon, Facebook, Tesla, Square. There's some really good ones. Now, the ones that have these black and green boxes on them, the black boxes, I'm interested in terms of what the earnings are going to be for overall market, for the overall sector that they may be in, not necessarily to take them for a trade. The ones that have green around them, I'm either involved in the stocks already, or I'm looking to maybe potentially take a trade in them, or I like the technical setup. But there's quite a bit going on. Chesapeake, Cara, Marathon Oil, and some of these names I went ahead and put in my list here. I should have a green box around this LL because I do happen, Lumber Liquidator, I do like the setup on that one technically, but it's not on the list. But there's an awful lot going on next week, and some pretty good looking charts that are coming out with some earnings. So definitely going to have some opportunities there. All right, so now that we've got all that completed, which only took 23 minutes, let's go ahead and get started with the stocks to watch for next week. And I've got a pretty decent list here of stocks to watch. NTRP, so we're going to start here. This one has data due Monday, and they are going to have some type of a conference call on Monday. Now, this is phase 2 data that's coming out. This is a very tiny stock, 7.3 million shares in the float. Had a pretty good volume spike on Friday, due out Monday, and they are expected to hold a conference call on Monday. So that'll probably happen pre-market, I think. And this could be this baby could rock, right? Recent reverse split, and that's of course why we have such a tiny float. And we all know how these things can get a little wacky, especially if the data comes in strong, right? Data comes in weak, this thing is going to get whacked, and get whacked hard. It's in a dominant downtrend on the weekly time frame, but has recently broken that trend. And if you look at where we're at right now, we're pulling back, right? Let's see. All right, so we had this dominant downtrend. We broke through it. We've been pulling back. It's a weekly time frame, but it's got a pretty interesting looking setup. We've broken above that dominant downtrend. Let's see if we get, and that was a nice little reversal on the week with some good volume. So this thing could definitely be in play and get a little wacky, especially if we get some shorts that try, if they come out with positive data, and you get some shorts that try to jump on this in the first day of the pop, that could create a pretty interesting scenario, right? All right, MDXG. This reported had what was it? Earnings on Friday. Nice move on Friday, and this was on my list for pre-market. And had I been trading and not taking a nap, I probably would have gotten involved in this one. Had a pretty nice move and pretty much grinding all day long. Now looking for a potential red to green move and take out that $13 holla. This has got a big old cup on the daily time frame, right? Big old cup. Maybe we pull back, a drip back here. Maybe we create a little handle. I don't know. Maybe we just get a red to green move and we take that out. Some good volume, some good accumulation. Now this has had a nice run off, and then had a nice pop off the news. Broke out of a nice flag formation. See if we get some follow through. Right. This is 91 million shares in the float and 31% short interest. So could get a little squeezy on this one. Let me back this out to the weekly. Take a look at it. That's had a hell of a run in a very short period of time. And this is, what is this, all-time highs here? Hold on, let's take a look. Yes, it is all-time highs. So, you know, look, we take out the highs. We take out $13 with conviction. You are in blue sky, right? We're in blue sky territory. And then you have, where is the resistance overhead? We don't know. Hasn't been created yet. So definitely worth watching for a break above 13. Like I said, a red to green move would be pretty nice, pretty sweet. Maybe you pull back to $12. Look at that as being potential price support. $12, maybe even $11.80, somewhere around there, right? Tag it there and see if we get a red to green bounce move from 11.80, 12 bucks. Pretty nice looking potential setup there. AZRX. Now this one also has, I know, why did I take a, why do I have, oh, Pelican Partners, that's why. Now it's 18.6% position in this stock. Now this one, and that happened after Friday after the close. Now it's been in a downtrend. It's a recent IPO, right? Been in a downtrend. So you've got this Pelican Partners that announced an 18.6% stake in the company. It is testing the 50-day moving average, testing the $4 holla. Had a little bit of a bounce. Now very, very small float, 5.8 million shares in the float. Stochastics have taken a nice turn upward. Relative strength taking a nice little turn upward. So maybe you get some continuation. It's likely going to have some resistance right here around 440 or so, where we've got the trend line. If it takes the trend line out, you know, who knows? Let's see where it goes. Probably more of a day trade opportunity for me than a swing. You know, I'm not really big on taking swings in bios, but I think worth keeping an eye on AZRX as a potential day trade. AEZS, nice pop with volume on Friday. They have data due, phase 3 data due on Monday. So we had a pop. We broke above the 200-day. Good volume, over 1 million shares. You got 12.9 million shares in the float. Good data on phase 3 data, right? If we get a good phase 3 report, this thing could take out this 200-day and go on a little rip, roar, and run. Now, it's had some pretty nice moves in the past. It can also be a pop and flopper, as you can see by these long candles, right? These long wicks. And we've got a long wick that we had on Friday. So, not one that you want to chase necessarily. You really don't want to chase anything, but maybe one to keep an eye on for an intraday setup, for a day trade. I don't know what their financial position is. Probably have to look at that. But I think this one most likely is going to be in play off of the phase 3 data. So worth having on your radar. MITK. So MITK, I have a history with this stock. I've played it. I've done okay on some occasions. I've done not so okay on other occasions. They reported earnings, good earnings report, good volume, closed at the high of the day, had a beautiful flag pattern. This is another one that probably could have been taken on Friday for an intraday trade. You know, look, maybe a red to green on this one. It is coming up into, you know, $9 is looks to be, you know, if it could take out 9, I think you get a test up to that 950 or so. Let me take a look on this. 940, this area is kind of a big spot for it. We'll see. I mean, it's breaking this longer term trend line, right? Is what I'm looking at here. It's overbought on a weekly time frame, so I don't know. Maybe on a pullback, it's more compelling to around 750 or so, or $7, where you've got some real price support. Kind of got a little W pattern here going, right? A little W, but it's not bad. I probably like this one more for a swing on a pullback. Maybe see how it does at 8. See if 8 holds the support. You know, let this overbought. I mean, look, it's overbought, but things can stay overbought. And that was an impressive move. Typically, MITK disappoints on earnings, right? They disappoint, they guide down, whatever. They must have said something good. I probably need to listen to the conference call on this. Like I said, I would consider this more of a swing trade than a day trade, and maybe I'd be more interested in getting it somewhere around 750 or even $7, right? A pullback to the 200-day moving average. But it's not to say that if we don't have some continued volume in the name, you couldn't get a nice scalp out of it in a day trade. So worth keeping an eye on. MITK. MDCA. All right, so not sure how this one got on my list. I guess maybe what I found interesting about it is it came down, it closed this gap, and then had a nice reversal, broke a, you know, it's tested this longer term trend line here. It's just below the 200-day. It basically came up, kissed the 200-day, and pulled back. Closed above the 50-day on decent volume, 1.2 million shares. Now, I'm not sure if this was off of earnings or what this was. Yeah, it was earnings. Partnership at 3 months ended. So it looks like a pretty good earnings call. You know, this would have been a great bounce trade, right off of support here at $7. I mean, this would have been a nice one to catch on this pullback red to green, but very impressive move on Friday. Closed up in the top portion of the candle, and I think the 200-day, watching that as resistance, could be a nice trade there. Take out $9, take out 950, maybe get a test up to about $10. I would scale out probably as close to 10 as possible, where it's had some resistance in the past, and then maybe hold some lottos and see if it can get up to in the $10.50 range. But not bad looking MDCA. PXLW had a nice little day on Friday, and this could have also been a nice day trade, like nice scalp. Looking at the 5-minute chart on that, I had a nice pullback to some support, and then bounced right off of there, closed up in the upper portion of the candle, you know, flirting with the $5 holla. This seems to be a big spot, this 490 area, right? If it can take it out, I think maybe you get a test up to 550 or so. And you know, you got an upward slope in 50-day moving average, upward slope in 200-day. Maybe as a swing close to the 50-day on a pullback. Maybe as a day trade on a break over 5 for a quick scalp. Worth having on the radar. Only 28 million shares in the float. And there's another stock in, and they reported earnings, and that was what gave this a little pop. So could see some continuation there. Absolutely worth having on your radar for a day trading opportunity. So TZA, you know, look, we saw the IWM had that pull. If we get a continued pull, I think you get a continued move on TZA and potentially come up and test that 50-day moving average right there around $18.37, 18.40 or so. Got some price resistance in that area. Let's call it 18.50, right? 18.50, 18.70. So look, it gets up into that area. 18.50 could be a place to actually take some off the table, but worth keeping an eye on TZA for that test. I think if look, you got stochastics curling up, you got RSI that's curling up. I think it's worth having on the radar, and this would be a day trade opportunity, not scalp day trade opportunity, not looking to hold on to TZA overnight. VSR. So look, May 10th, they're going to have earnings, and they're going to have a timely SEC filing in May 10th, announcement of their full year 2017 first, second, and third quarter financial results and business outlook. Now that's a big deal. Now I'm not suggesting that these earnings could be good, but this was reported. When was this reported? 2 days ago. So Friday, I think it was reported after the close, right? So I think that could be a big deal here. It had a big gap off of prior news on good volume and then pulled back, closing. They're getting compliant with the SEC, and I think that is a big deal. So, they may have to do a reverse split, depending on what their earnings are. There's a lot of things that are involved with this particular stock. They have a lot of contracts, man. I mean, they've got a pretty decent sized backlog. We're going to have a lot more clarity after their earnings, which are May 10th, but this could run into those earnings. So I think this is worth keeping an eye on. You don't want to chase this stock. Actually, I don't know if they're going to be able to do a reverse split. Looks like they already did. 6.6 million shares in the float. Did they do a reverse split? Hold on. It's a pretty tiny float. Well, I'm not seeing any kind of a reverse split, but it could get even tinier. Right? All right, let's take a look at that daily once again. It's not overbought. I mean, this is probably a day trade opportunity. And I'll tell you, if I were to take this as a day trade and bank some, I likely would hold some lottos, maybe, heading up into that May 10th event. So I think VSR is worth keeping an eye on. One thing I want to bring up real quick as I'm looking at this stuff, NTRP, look at the volume buzz, plus 3,000%, MDXG plus almost 1,000%, AZRX almost 1,000%, AEZS. So, that's one thing I do also pay attention to. MITK, 1,000%, a lot of volume increase there. That MDXG, 30% short interest, and I've got some others here, but we'll be taking a look at those in a minute. So VSR, I think it's worth paying attention to. All right, let's take a look at OCLR. So we've got a couple of names in this space. This is a hell of a reversal candle right here. It broke below 8 and had a nice little snapback, closed right back at 8. I mean, it got down to $7. That would have been a nice one to catch on Friday. That's what I get for, but you have to understand, as a Cleveland Browns fan, the draft is like my Super Bowl, man. So let's see. We had a good reversal there. Close 8. They report earnings on Tuesday after the close. So, you've got an event coming up. It broke through this support really convincingly, and I think that scared, that probably shook some weak hands out of this stock ahead of the report. Now, their last couple of earnings reports have been really strong, and that's what these pops have been. It's had a nice run off of earnings. It's below the 200-day, and it's just kind of a bear flag here. So, this is an iffy kind of questionable type play. I may look to trade it Monday if it gets some follow through on that reversal for a scalp or a day trade or whatever, maybe hold a little tiny position into earnings and see if it gets any follow through off of a good earnings report. Could be a good popper. So I don't know. Definitely looking for a potential scalp. Not sure if I would hold it through, or hold anything through the earnings report though. But pretty impressive little candle there on Friday. We'll see if it gets some follow through. EXEL. So they have earnings Tuesday after the close, and look, it's been building a base, right? It's been building a base for a while. If they report a good earnings report, I think you're going to take out the $24 holla, which, if I'm not mistaken, is all-time highs, right? And if you look at this on the weekly time frame, that's just a pretty looking chart. It really is. And this is probably more of a swing or even a long-term hold consideration because it's got so many shares in the float, 244 million shares in the float, and that's not huge, but it is a thicker stock. And look, if this pulls back, if they have a decent earnings report and it pulls back to $20, I think, or 19, I think that's a good place to maybe start to dip your toe. It is overbought, so that's one of my concerns. It's a little overbought, and even if they have a good earnings report, maybe you get a pullback in the stock. And I think at 19 or so, or $20, it could be worth a shot for a swing. MCRN. So this is 38 million shares in the float, and I'm looking at this one as just a potential flat top breakout. Now, it's actually had a nice run recently. It got a little overbought, pulling back a little bit. It's been, the two areas of potential support and resistance between $17. We've got the 200-day moving average there as potential support. We've got some price support in this area. Like I said, it's already had a pretty decent little move higher. It kind of looks like it's flagging. It keeps trying to test this 1925 and pulls back. So we've got a really clear line of resistance. So maybe this just continues to flag out a bit, get some real nice tight consolidation in those candles, and then take out that 1925 with some conviction. I think you get a pretty nice pop out of this thing, because it's been, testing this area for so long. And when it finally breaks, I think you could get a nice little pop, nice little run. So worth keeping an eye on, MCRN. SQ reports on... It's here somewhere. Wednesday after the close, along with Tesla. It's overbought, right? It is overbought. Maybe we drift down heading into the earnings report, 17.50 or so, or even get down to $17, test the 50-day moving average. It's been grinding higher. We've had some good reports within that space already. It could continue to grind higher into the earnings report. Maybe you pull back to 17.50 and then they report a good earnings, or $17. This probably, look, 48% short, interest short. If it pulls back to $17, it's a higher risk type swing. But, if the earnings are good and they give good guidance and this stock pulls back, I would consider that an opportunity. It does have a gap on the daily to potentially fill down here. That is a little bit concerning, but I think I like this stock for a long-term hold or swing position on any kind of significant weakness. If it were to come back, if it were to come back and fill that gap to $15, I'm probably dipping my toe with the starter position in my long-term hold portfolio. So I do like Square. Could be a day trade opportunity if they crush earnings, and with 48% short interest. At what point in time do you decide to throw in the towel on your short, right? I mean, this is flirting with all-time highs. I think, at some point you're going to say, okay, I was wrong. Unless you just want to keep adding to a losing position. I don't know. Sprint. So look, Sprint, thick stock. Definitely more of a swing or long-term hold than a day trade. But it's had some decent moves in single days. I mean, it gets some range. Flirting with $9. Speculation that maybe T-Mobile and Sprint could hook up. I don't know. It actually has been range bound for a while, and if it can take out $9 with, or let's call it 950, right? 950. If we can take out 950 with some real conviction, it's a big area. This is a big area to take out, 950. More of a swing. Like I said, more of a swing or a long-term hold. That's a big spot to take out, and could definitely be worth paying attention to their earnings, which happen on Wednesday before the open. Now, it is overbought, so maybe looking at this one on a pullback as close to $8 if they have decent earnings, or 750, the 200-day moving average. If they have decent earnings and good guidance, okay, pull back to $8 as price support to dip your toe for a long-term hold may not be a terrible idea. Something to keep an eye on. I like it. I like the way it's been range bound. Worth paying attention to. SWIR, they have earnings coming up on Sierra Wireless. Where are you? Hold on. I'm looking. CenturyLink. Oh, Sierra Wireless is Thursday after the close. Now, they have also a big gap on the daily to fill down to about the 200-day moving average, right around $18.70. This is off of the last earnings report, was this big gap, and pretty much it's held up really well. Right now, look how tight these candles are right at the 50 EMA. Pretty impressive hold. It's got a pretty clear line in the sand of support here at, let's just call it 24.80, right? Really clear line in the sand of support there. And let me take a look real quick at SWIR's. Hold on a second. That was the wrong one. Rank and file. All right, let me just see what the float is on SWIR. All right. Statistics on. So we've got for SWIR 30 million shares in the float, 3% short interest, plenty of cash in the bank. I don't know what their debt is. They've got positive cash flow. So looking pretty good actually there, and a fairly small float. I mean, it's not a tiny float, but smaller float. If they report good earnings, now this could drift down to the 100 EMA maybe. Test support right around $23 heading into earnings, or it could wind up taking out that trend line and moving higher. But I think this one is worth keeping an eye on. For if they have another good earnings report, we may see a duplication of this move, right? Maybe see another gap and move higher. And this thing could probably go back up and test in the $30 range. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on SWIR next week, maybe heading into earnings. Now look, AKBA Biotech had some news. The shocker with this one was Adam Feuerstein actually was positive on this name, and that is a very, very, very rare event. Actually even wrote an article about them being a potential takeout candidate. Now, big gap on the daily that could potentially fill. Out of the upper Bollinger Band, having difficulty with the $14 holla. I think, really, on a pullback to 12.50 or lower, right? If it were to even get back down to $11, I think this one, and it's rare that I will say this, but maybe this is a one that you do consider for a potential swing or long-term hold. Okay, so you get it at 11 and it falls to 10. Um, would I sell it? I wouldn't. I probably would add to my position at 10. And the deal that they announced looked like a pretty darn good deal to me. They're not going to need to do a capital raise, so I think this is pretty compelling even for a swing or long-term hold, and I don't say that very often for biotechs. But on some continued weakness, if we were to pull back to $11, I would look at that probably as a gift, and maybe even more so at 10. So worth keeping an eye on. AKBA, BMRN. This one had data come out, and it was really good data or I think an approval actually, not just data. BMRN. Hold on a second. And this is in a big. Now this is definitely probably more of a swing or a long-term hold. They got a approval on their drug. It's not a cheap drug. $27,000 a day or a week or something like that, but some crazy number. Uh, you know, I like round number rolls, and this potentially could take out the $100 holla, right? This would be more of a long-term hold or swing type play, like I said. But let's take a look. Let's back it out to the weekly time frame and see what we're looking at here. We've got basically lower left to upper right. Now, it recently had a pretty big pullback, right? But has held this trend line. And, the way it's basing out, look, $82, 80, 81.50, somewhere in there, a pretty clear line of support. This thing was up to $150, right? And if you just look at the way it's kind of broken out over this trend line right here, right? We got this tight consolidation, and then we broke on good volume. I think if this takes out $98, what is it? Not 98. $99 with some real conviction, I think you're going to get a nice move out of BMRN. And I think it's worth having on the radar. Now, it looks like the last quarter wasn't so great, but with the approval of this drug, I would think things would be looking up for this company. Now, is overbought, so maybe the ideal entry for a play for BMRN, maybe the ideal entry is somewhere close to $92, where we've got some price resistance and support, right? And if it continues to drop to $90 and the 50-day moving average, you scale in, you add a little bit more. I like BMRN for a long-term hold potential opportunity. CARA reports on Thursday after the close. Got a nice look. Now it is below the 50-day moving average. It was oversold. RSI is below 30. We look for a break above 30. We look for decent earnings. This could be a decent swing opportunity. You could take a lotto position heading into earnings potentially if you're comfortable with that type of thing. It's just a lottery ticket. You take 100 shares. You say, okay, let's see what happens, right? Insider buys 500,000 shares at $18.19. Offering price, they just did an offering. It priced at $18. So no need to raise capital. That's behind them. We'll see what they say with earnings and with the update. But I think this one is worth keeping. It's only got 22 million shares in the float with 26% short interest. So could get a little crazy on Thursday after the close, or Friday morning actually, if they report some significant news with their earnings report. Now, we take out this trend line, and we get down here into the 13 $14 range for whatever reason. This could become really compelling for some type of a swing, or even, I don't think that'll happen, but pull back to the 200-day moving average could be really interesting. But worth keeping an eye on Cara, potentially for a day trade opportunity because of the small float and the short interest, or could be a play up into earnings, and then you get out completely heading into the earnings report. So worth keeping an eye on Cara, MRUS. All right, what happened with MRUS? 3.2 million shares at 25. Okay, these guys must have done a... Oh no, that's what it was. 3.2 million shares at 25 bucks. Insight. Now something's going on with this. Clinical stage company last year, transformative, blah blah blah. Okay, it looks like they actually reported, and I'm not sure why I put this on my list. I mean, it did break this little trend line. Maybe it was this Insight buying 3.2 million shares at 25, and the fact that it's at 22. That could be it. But hold on a second. Let me see why I took this. Okay, $1.91. Now, they reported after the close. A big miss. Yeah, alright. I'm not sure why I put this on here, and I'm probably not that crazy about it. Big miss off of the earnings. Maybe the fact that Insight bought so many shares. Maybe I'm thinking about this as some kind of a potential pullback candidate to 17. I don't know. Actually, disregard this one. TWTR, Twitter. Full disclosure, I'm already involved in the stock at 14 and change, and had some news after the close on Friday. Jack Dorsey bought. Hold on a second. I'll tell you exactly what he bought. I thought I wrote it in here, but apparently not. TWTR. Buys 574,000 shares. Buys 540K at 574K. My bad. 74K at 16. I thought it was 16 something, 1652 or something like that in April. So pretty significant buy by Jack Dorsey, right? Out of the upper Bollinger Band. Look, I may look to add to the position. This is in my longer term hold account. I would look to add to the position, but probably would look to do so, I don't know, closer to 1550 or so if it were to get there. At 1750, I probably would look to actually scale out a little bit of what I have. So we'll see how Twitter acts on Monday. But that was a pretty good insider buy. And look, if we get continued weakness in the NASDAQ, we may see continued weakness, and we may see more weakness in Twitter. And I think, potentially at 1545, 1525, down to the 50 SMA, I think this is worth, adding to the position and holding. Because I think at some point these guys either get acquired or they just get their act together and figure out a way to... Look, if Twitter came out with something like TweetDeck and charged me $1 a month or $2 a month, I would pay it a heartbeat because I can't live without Twitter. So And I think if they did that, that would be you'd see an immediate impact to that stock. So Twitter, worth keeping an eye on. I know this is a long video, and I apologize, but I got some good stuff going on this week. So if you want to cut out. But got a few more to get through here. PCTI earnings May 9th. Really hot looking setup. Right, not a lot of volume there. 13 million share in the float. Earnings are May 9th. Could be a day trade. Take out the $8 holla. Right, got a big old cup here. That's the handle, maybe pulling back. Some decent volume spikes recently. Right, maybe this drifts down a little bit more here. Maybe it pulls all the way back to 728. I don't know. That could be an area to take it for a bounce, but looking for a break over that trend line with conviction. More of a day trade opportunity. Want to see some volume, right? Could be a day trade opportunity there. BPMX, penny stock, just did an offering and priced the offering at, actually I've got that note on here somewhere. Reverse split potential, so you got to be careful there. They also have approved increasing the shares. They just did an offering. 78 cents is where it priced. Warrants also priced with an exercise at 90 cents. They have data, FDA, trial data due in early May. So don't know exactly when that's going to be. This could get a $1 holla. It's got a catalyst on the horizon. Worth keeping an eye on. This would be, day trade. Really, for me, probably day trade only. If the data turns out to be really stellar, which it has been for this company for the first few trials, this could really get ripping. It's a big industry that they're a big. It's for acne, right? Supposedly they've got this really great thing for acne, and that's a big market, I believe. So you just got to be careful with this one. Look for a potential day trade opportunity. I think you take out, you get a one test and maybe take out the $1 holla. Those are typically very good, strong, powerful moves. So keep an eye on BPMX. PME, this is it says marine, it's farm products. They're a global fishing company. Kind of an interesting looking setup on the daily. I mean, nice moving average, 50-day rising moving average. We're tightening up as we consolidate here. This company pays a dividend, right? Pays a little dividend. It's kind of worth watching, I think. 34 million shares in the float. Been consolidating for a while. If it takes out the $5 holla with conviction, I think you could get a pretty decent day trade out of it. Look for some good volume. The volume's not bad. I mean, 265,000 shares traded on Friday. I mean, the volume's not bad. So look for decent volume. Break over 5. Could be a day trade opportunity there. Groupon has earnings on Wednesday before the open. Just filled this gap. I think this is a big pop off their last earnings. They have another good earnings report. We could see another pop, right? Maybe we just come back up and test this trend line here, get a pop over $4, test the 200-day. If we take all that out, though, then I think you look for Groupon to pull back and find support on that trend line in that 200-day moving average. So it could be an interesting day trade opportunity off of earnings. There's 20% short interest. It could also be a decent swing on a pullback to $4 or so as support. Take it for a swing. I don't know. We have to see what the guidance is from Groupon, but worth keeping an eye on that one for a day trade or maybe even a swing. Meat, I think Meat already reported earnings, and it's flirting with the $6 holla. It's a big spot. Price Canaccord Genuity put a $10 price target on it. I think they just did an acquisition of a company that's going to be accretive. This one is pretty interesting. 58 million shares in the float, 11% short interest. You take out 6 with some conviction. I think you're going to have some resistance somewhere around that 620 area. But maybe this one is more interesting on a pullback, right? Pull back to 550 or so. You've got a trend line support here. You've got the 200-day. You've got the 50 EMA and the 50 SMA that look like they might be trying to cross that 200-day, which would give us the golden cross. So look for a pullback to 550. Could be an interesting spot to take it for a swing. It's overbought, so I wouldn't be surprised, and it's at resistance, right? It's at price resistance, so I wouldn't be surprised if it were to pull back and test that 200-day, test the 50 EMA, and then bounce. That could be a really great entry for a swing or even a longer term hold. LPTH, love this. I've been watching this for the last couple of weeks. It's had a nice pop. It's pulled back on lower volume. You know, the good volume on these pops. It can be a little bit of a pop and flopper, right? Pop and flopper. But so this, I did a little bit of homework on this company over the weekend here. Recent offering priced at $120, and they did that offering to do an acquisition of a competitor to increase their capabilities in infrared, and optics, and all this stuff. This company is in an extremely hot sector right now. Opticals, you know, between telephone companies and cable companies, you know, fiber optics, these guys are big in this space, and this acquisition is going to be accretive. The last quarter, they only had 10 days of the company that they had acquired. 10 days of their earnings contributed to their report, and they had a pretty good report, right? 119% increase in revenue. So I'm looking for a decent quarter out of these guys, with now the acquisition being behind them and a full quarter of results to show. So I think this one could be really, really interesting. I like the look of the 50-day moving averages sloping up above the 200-day moving average. I think this could be a good long-term hold, actually, maybe a swing or long-term hold. I think this space is hot. AAOI, OCLR. There's several in this space, but I think this one has not participated in the sector run as much as some of those other names, and I think this bad boy could be undervalued. I think potentially you get a test up to $3.58. They report earnings on May 4th. If they kill it, I think you're going to see a big pop in this one, and I may take a lotto position heading into those earnings just for fun. All right. X, we talked about this in the very beginning here. You know, look, here's what we need to see. We need to see this hold up in this area. Hold this low of 21.80, 22 bucks. Right? We've got some price support here. Oops. That's the wrong one. We got some potential price support in that area. You know, if not, if it breaks below the $22, maybe we start looking at it at 21 for potential support somewhere in there, or 20.50. We got some pretty clear support there. You know, like I said, it was a nasty earnings report, but got completely out of the lower Bollinger Band. Could get some kind of a snapback in this thing. It's a thick stock, 173, not too thick though. 173 million shares in the float, 12% short interest for a day trade, or maybe even, to start to build if you believe that infrastructure is going to happen, if you believe that, steel prices are going to be able to come up, if you believe that, this could be an interesting long-term hold, right? But I wouldn't get overly aggressive after that. I mean, what you really want to start to see, if you look at it, we're almost filled this gap on the daily right here, which at 2050, that gap becomes filled. I think if you really look at it from a long-term perspective, I think things could be turning in this sector's favor, but we'll see what happens. We'll see, we'll see what happens. Worth keeping an eye on X, but I would be looking at that one more of a long-term hold position probably, or at least a decent swing. And then GRVY, I think these guys reported earnings after the close on Friday. Or wait a minute. Yes. Something else happened with GRVY. Let me take a look. Hold on. I'm done. So 56 cents versus 44-cent loss. That's what caught my eye. 20.89 million versus 9 million in the prior period. This looks like a huge beat. And I don't know, if this is a one-time deal or if they sold something off or what, but that looks like a pretty big beat. And that was Friday after the close. So, potentially, let's see, what do we got? Let me see what the volume is on this GRVY real quick. GRVY. Oh. $31 million. Oh, that's $31 million in cash. Don't know what their float. All right, so their float. Oh my Lord, their float is 1.41 million shares. Now, no short interest, but if this thing pops on Monday, this could be a little wacky little thing right here, right? 187 million or 187,000 shares traded on Friday. With 1.1 million shares in the float, this could get really wacky. After that, crazy earnings report, and it looks like they did a reverse split way back in 2015. I haven't seen any more reverse splits. This thing could get nuts. So worth keeping an eye on. GRVY. You play that one lotto style, right? You make sure you play it size appropriate. All right. That is it. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you found something constructive from this video that maybe you can take advantage of next week. If you haven't checked out alphawolftrading.com, please do so. Come by and check us out. I have a really great group of members, and look, it's not a huge membership, but I have a great group of members, and I'm all about quality over quantity. So if you're looking for a good home, a good place to hang out with some good people, come check us out at alphawolftrading.com. If you're looking to learn how to become a better, more consistent trader, take a look at the services we offer there. Working on a webinar in the near future, and hopefully I'll get it done within the next week or two. We'll be doing a free webinar for everyone soon, and I will give you more details. Follow us over at Alpha Wolf Trading, and I will be presenting updates there. Follow me on Twitter, VegasTrader66, and you'll find some updates there. Follow me on InvestFeed, and you'll see some postings there. So thanks for taking the time. Have a wonderful Sunday. This was an awesome weekend. I'm very happy, and looking forward to next week. We've got a lot going on. Don't chase. Always know your risk reward, and have a plan for each and every single trade. All right. Enjoy yourselves. Be safe. Have fun. I'll see you next week.